Welcome to Constitution Television, Constitution Study Television. I'm your host, Douglas V. Gibbs. It's great to have you. Now, I wanted to talk about secession real quick. Even though really next in the series I wanted to get into the preamble, secession is actually an important topic because it really is a question of, is this a voluntary union or a firm union? Now, these states, remember, used to be colonies, independent, unique, different, like individuals, like you and I. And so they decided to come together in a union voluntarily because on their own they couldn't do it. They couldn't survive. They look at the Revolutionary War. And in the beginning, it was considered to be Massachusetts War. I mean, think about it. Everything happened in Massachusetts. Boston Massacre, Boston Tea Party, Lexington and Concord, and so on and so forth. And so the other colonies were watching this and go, gosh, Massachusetts is having a rough time with their war. It didn't take very long, though, before the other colonies realized that that war could spread to them, and it would spread to them, and it did. And so they united in a union in order to fight the British. The original document, the first thing, the official document in which they acted as a union is called the Articles of Association. And it was an agreement between all of the colonies to boycott British products together. That was their first agreement. So in many ways, folks consider that the first founding document. Shortly after that, there was the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and ultimately the United States Constitution, all as a union. But here's the question. Is it a voluntary union where they can depart from that union if they feel like it's not operating properly, or if the social contract, Constitution, has been breached? Do they have the option to get out of that contract? Secession came up right before the War of 1812 because a number of the states felt that economically the Union was a trouble and they would do better on their own. The Articles of Secession were canceled when the War of 1812 broke out, and they all not only joined together to fight the war, but also, wartime economies tend to help economies out. Next time we saw secession was the approach of the war between the states, South Carolina being the first to secede. In that case, all of the southern states, and not everybody knows this, seceded between the time that Abraham Lincoln was elected and his inauguration. Now, Alexander Hamilton admitted that it was a voluntary union. While he was not a fan of it, he admitted it. That's the reason why he proposed that there should be a perpetual debt, because if there's a perpetual debt, then there could be a perpetual union, because the states would be less likely to secede if they owed part of the debt, and if there's a debt in place. That's one of the reasons why he pushed a national bank and all that jazz. And secession has also been a topic that's come up a lot lately because, we've had Texas and California talk about secession for different reasons. Texas because of under President Obama feeling like the country was not going right and that they would need to secede. And actually, there's a secession clause in the Texas state constitution. In the case of California, it's been over SB 54, the sanctuary state status, the federal government going up against the state of California. California is saying, hey, we're going to secede. You have the Reconquista group, the La Razas, so on and so forth, saying we'll secede and then apply for to join Mexico. Well, I don't see it happening. And the other question is, well, gosh, can a state secede? Is it really even possible, or is it illegal? Well, in the secession came up a number of times, and John Marshall, when John Marshall was the Chief Justice of the United States, he never actually ruled that secession was unlawful, but he constantly discussed the firmness of the Union. By the time Abraham Lincoln, matter of fact, got into law, this idea of a firm Union was really commonplace understanding and common understanding. And so that was part of where he got his ideas of a firm union and holding together the union no matter what it takes. In 1824, John Marshall stated that the states essentially let go of their sovereignty when they converted their league, Articles of Confederation, into a government, Constitution, and their Congress of Ambassadors, which is really what they were prior to the Constitution, into a federal Congress. In 1799, Jefferson wrote to Madison, though, a disagreement to that about his conviction about how the states have a right to separate themselves from the Union rather than give up rights of self-government if it is necessary. Now, the courts really never say anything about secession until after the war between the states. The courts ruled that secession was illegal with Texas versus White in 1869. Now that said, that's an unlawful ruling. You can't change the Constitution through a judicial ruling. The U.S. Constitution, by its very nature of providing example after example of state sovereignty, recognizes that we have a voluntary union. In other words, if it's a voluntary union, the states are voluntary members and they can remove themselves at any time. And when you talk about secession when it comes to the war between the states, I don't call it a civil war, by the way, or I tend not to, because a civil war is normally a fight within one entity. The states had seceded. They were no longer part of the entity. They had removed themselves from the U.S. Constitution. They were no longer under the rules of the Constitution. So many of the excuses Lincoln used to attack the Confederacy were actually not necessarily constitutional, because the Confederacy was outside the Constitution once they had seceded. That brings up even the story of West Virginia. Some people think West Virginia became a state unconstitutionally because the Virginia legislature didn't really agree to it. Well, had Virginia been still within the Union, a state, then that would be a true statement. But what had happened is Virginia had seceded, so they were no longer under the Constitution. They were no longer under the umbrella or in that contract. So what happened in the case of West Virginia is those counties seceded from Virginia, and they reapplied for statehood, or applied for statehood, and their statehood was approved. Interestingly enough, not everybody knows this, West Virginia actually originally came into the Union as a slave state. They didn't secede from Virginia and reapply to the Union because they disagreed with the Confederacy regarding slavery, but that they disagreed with the Confederacy as in the point of separating from the Union. Now, that all said, secession is also a valuable tool. If states are trying to get the federal government to behave, what greater threat than secession, leaving the party? What greater threat than that is there than that? Some people even say with California, if California was to secede, what would happen in the case of California? You got the San Diego Navy base. That's still federal land. Would the federal government still have to hang on to that? Would that still belong to the federal government? Would that be an island of the United States in the new California Republic? Or would that wind up being our own Fort Sumter and lead to something greater, such as a war, a military conflict? Of course, I've always joked and said that, we ought to just let California secede, let all of the hard left folks move to California, everybody who's not hard left live in the rest of the country, and then in a few years just take California over, because they won't have any guns anyway. They won't be able to defend themselves. But hey, I am in California, though, and I love my state, and there are conservatives, constitutionalists, those of us who believe in the original intent of the Constitution here in California, but we are very few and far between. That said, thanks for listening. Thanks for viewing this video. I would love for you to subscribe. There's a subscribe button. Share this video. Let's get the word out about what we're doing here with the ConstitutionAssociation.com and my efforts right here on Constitution Study Television. And also, we do have a Patreon account and a donation page. So if you want to help out with our cause, it would be definitely appreciated. Patreon.com/DouglasVGibbs, or you can go to DouglasVGibbs.com/donate.php. Be sure to share this. Be sure to subscribe. It's been great talking to you. United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, my friends. God bless you. We'll see you in the next video.